This is Gemara Baba Kama Daf Ayin Gimel, and we're holding on Ayin Gimel Amid Aleph. In the previous year, we went all the way onto the two dots. We finished with the famous line. Excuse me. Hilchsa Kavaseda Abaye Biyal Kigam. And if we just take a half a moment and we look at Rashi in the first narrow line, Rashi points out that what is Yal Kigam? Simone Shmuoi Sein Vizu Echad Mehem Eidei Zaymim. As we go through Shas, we find different references of the Yal Kigam, and this is the ayin of the Yal Kigam, Eid Zaymim. But before we begin the next Gemara by the two dots, we have to remind ourselves of the Machlekes Abaye and Rava. We pass like Abaye that holds a daimim Abaye Amar lemafreyahu nifsal. Rava was of the opinion mikamu labahu nifsal. For a paskening like Abaye that lemafreya back from the original moment, there is a paslus. Says the Gemara, the two dots again, 10 lines down, and Gimel Amid Half. Tanan, we learned in a Mishnah. This is going to be a kasha on Abaye, which of course, in the setup in the Gemara, maybe it's a little bit interesting, as we just finished saying we paskin like Abaye. But either way, comes along the Gemara and asks on Abaye from the Mishnah. Says our Mishnah, Ganav al pi shnayim v'tavachu machar al piem. They steal, and then there's a tvicha mechira based on the same edim. And then v'nimsa zaymim, and then they're found to be zaymimin. And we quickly remind ourselves, what does it mean they're found to be zaymimin? That means that even though they gave eidos, testifying that this guy stole, this guy subsequently sold or slaughtered the animal, the eidim are subsequently found to be zaymimim. Again, what does that mean? That Ruvain and Shimon testified about an action happening here in Muncie. The Eidim Zaymimin, in conforming to the rule of Kasher Zamam, Lasais Lachiv, Kaini Aseloi, where they try to obligate someone else, they are obligated in paying. They tried to obligate him in paying Kefel for the fact that he stole. The Eidim Zayim, have to pay Kefel. They tried to obligate him in paying Dalit Vehei because they testified about the Tvicha Mechira. They have to pay Dalit Vehei. Says the Gemara, my laugh. What is the case of the Mishnah? Zinat Sha'idu ala Geneva. They testified about the Geneva, and then the Chazru v'Ha'idu ala Tvicha, and then they testified about the Tvicha. Ve'hozmu ala Geneva, v'Chazru hozmu ala Tvicha, and they originally found to be Eidim Zaymim on the steal, on the fact that they stole. Then they're found to be Eidim Zaymim on the Tvicha. End of the way that we're assuming the way to learn the Mishnah. Based off of this, says the Gemara, and this is the punchline, the Kasha Abaye. According to Abaye, that when Eid Zaymim is found to be Eid Zaymim, apostles back Lemafreya, asks the Gemara, honey, these Kivan de Ismu Lehu Ageneva. Once they're found to be Zaymimin on the Geneva, so then if the Hazama goes back to the original moment, then it's revealed that when the Chiyasidu Atvicha, Psulin Havu. when they gave Eidos on the Tvicha Mechira, they were apostle, because they already found to be Zaymim on the original act of Geneva. So therefore, what's the kasha? Amai mishalmim atvicha. So why do they have to pay for the tvicha? Their eidos did nothing. The whole rule of kasher zamam is whatever you are going to do to someone else, you have to do. But if they're found to be apostle, then they weren't going to do anything. So then what is the reason? Amai mishalmin atvicha. Why would they have to pay for the slaughtering? Answers the Gemara, Amri Achab Mayaskinan. They were first found to be Zaymin on the Tvicha. So that means that their Eidos on the Tvicha was a good Eidos. They're found to be Zaymin with regard to the Tvicha. That's why they have to pay Dal V'Hei. And then subsequently they're found to be Zaymin on the Geneva. Therefore, they have to pay Kefel. Says the Gemara, very nice that in time this works out on the timeline. Amri, but ask the Gemara, Saif, or smack in the middle of the Gemara, the first line is Saif, ki haji, Mrs. Ageneva, Iglai Milsa, Tchiasidu Atvicha Psulan Have. Very good that in real time it works out. But once eventually they're found to be Zaymin on the Geneva, that reveals to us that at the moment that they gave testimony about the Tvicha, they were apostle. If they were apostle, same kash, Shamay Mishalm Tvicha. Concludes the Gemara, V'helchasa Sheidu, Bivas Achas, V'hozmu. Says the Gemara, you know the way that we can explain the Mishnahs, it all happened, Bivas Achas. That is the reason why the Eidim would have to pay both the Kefel for their Eidos on the Geneva, as well as Dalad V'Hei on their Eidos for the Tvicha Umachira. Continues the Gemara, again in the middle of the Amid, first one line is V'asachas, Lema Kitanoi. Suggests the Gemara, let's say that this Machlekes Abaye Rava, this Machlekes, how do we view Eidim Zaymimin? Does it passel in Mafreya? Or does it only passel Mikanu Laba at the moment they're found to be Zaymimim? Let us suggest this is a Machlekes Tanoim. As we learned in our Braisa, Yeshnayim Me'idin Oisai Sheganaf. Two people give Eidos that someone stole. Ve'hein Me'idin Oisai Shetavach. And then what happens? They themselves say, they admit, they didn't only steal, but they even were tavach. They slaughtered the animal. And then subsequently, v'hozmar geneva. Then the original Eidim are found to be Zaymimim with regard to the Geneva. So again, we have an Eidos on the Geneva, and we have a Haidah on the Tvicha. Says the Gemara, quoting this Braisa, Eidos shebala miksasa, Bala Kula. Says the Braisa, Eidos which partially falls away. Why does it partially fall away? Because the Eidim are found to be Hazama with regard to the Geneva. Therefore, the Eidos is fully batal. But Hozmu ala Tvicha. Excuse me, I read the whole case wrong. A new line doesn't make sense. Go back. There's no Haidah over here. Excuse me. Rewind. One more time. Hayushnayim Eidim Oisa Shekanav. Vehein, not and they, meaning the Balabai is being Maida, excuse me. Vehein, and those Eidim, the same Eidim give Eidos with regard to the Tvicha, and then V'hozma al Geneva. So now it makes sense that when they become Hazama on the Geneva, meaning the whole thing unravels and there's no Eidos either on the Geneva utvicha, tvicha mechira. Hozmo ala tvicha, what happens if they're found to be zaymimin on the tvicha? Hu mishalem tashlumei kefel. Then he has to pay kefel, the one that stole. Vehein mishalem tashlumei shleisha. And the Eidim that are found to be zaymimin pay threefold. Because again, they're only zaymimin on the tvicha, not on the original Geneva. Amar Rav Yosi explains Rav Yosi b'medvar marum ishtei eidios. Aval eidos achas. If it was all one eidos shvala miksasa batla kula. So says the Gemara. Let's suggest exactly what's going on over here. My b'shtei eduyos umay be'eduyos achas. What does this mean? Two eidos, one eidos. Lema b'shtei eduyos mamish. If this means in reality, with two different eduyos, b'shtei kitoi eidos, two groups of edim achas, b'shtei kitoi eidos, with two groups of eidos. And what does eidos achas mean? Bekat achas, with one group of edim zachars, that one after another. And on that is where Omar Rav Yosi commented that what? Be'eidos achas bekat achas v'zachar. What's the problem? There's no way to learn the brisa that way, because ki mishadi ageneva v'hodar mishadi atvicha. Because then if the same ones that gave eidos on the geneva, they themselves, they gave eidos on the tvicha. So what's the problem? Ki misu atvicha. So then, once they're found to be hazama on the tvicha, they are hazama entirely. And therefore, how are you saying that there's hazama on the geneva? Because if there are two subsequent actions, why is one pinned on the other? The only way we can say if the two things are somewhat intrinsically tied together. But over here, if they're two different eduyos, the fact that they were lying about something that happened on the next day, why does that prove that the previous day they lied as well? So says the Gemara, that can't be what Rav Yosi meant. Elalav, what does Rav Yosi mean? B'shtei eduyos. You know what it means with regard to two eduyos? Be'eidos achas kein shtei eduyos. That when Rav Yosi came along and made his comment, when Rav Yosi said, "Remedvar mamurim b'shtei eduyos, aval eidos achas, eidos shabala miksasa bala kula." You know what Rav Yosi meant? Rav Yosi meant b'shtei eduyos, be'eidos achas kein, similar to shtei eduyos. So what does that mean? Omay ninu. Kat achas b'zeh achar zeh. This means one group that gave eidos about the geneva, then they gave eidos about the tvicha, one after another at two different times. And then what's Rav Yosi commenting? Rav Yosi saying, so in this case, if there's hazama on the subsequent tvicha, then the earlier geneva is a good eidos. Avol be'eidos achas bivas achas. Then loi. Then if it's all one eidos, then we say eidos shabala miksasa batla kula. So now again, we're in the middle of trying to figure out how the machlekes Rav and Abaye can be a machlekes Tanoim. So says the Gemara, once we understand what's going on within the shita of Rav Yosi, that the machlekes is one group of Eidim that gave testimony about the Geneva, and then it's about the Tzvicha at the same time. So now suggest the Gemara, Visavruha. Now we could explain that everyone holds the Kuli Alma over 6 lines from the white lines. Toich Gidei Dibur Kidibur Dami. That everyone agrees that when you say something within a moment of time, Toich Kidei Dibur, which of course we know classically, as we'll see in Amud Beis, it means the amount of time to say Shalom Aleichem Rebbe, Shalom Alecha Rebbe, within the amount of time is considered one Dibur. So what's the machlekes Tanakama and Rav Yosi? My laba kamiflagi, the Rabbanan tzavim mikana laba nifsal. The Rabbanan, the Tanakama, that when the Eidim are found to be zaymimin, from that moment and further, does not go back in time, and therefore, and therefore for that moment they become Eidim zaymim atvicha dekamis zami itzum. Therefore, the Rabbanan hold it goes to the moment of the Eidos and further. What's that moment, Geneva? It doesn't go back to talk to anything about the Geneva. Whereas in the last narrow line, Rav Yosi Savar Lemafreya hu nifsal. No, it goes back to Lemafreya, and therefore V'kivan demiyad ki asidu hu demifsali. At the moment they gave Eidos, they're considered pasul. Why? Because the subsequent Azama is going to go backwards. Lemafreya and pasul him up the whole time. That's the reason ki yisnu lu atvicha. Therefore, Hismahu nami ageneva. Tatoich de diber kediber dami. That's the reason why Tanakama is about the Miksasa Balakula, because retroactively it all is possible, and therefore both they do yais go out the window. So suggest the Gemara, the Machlaik is Abaye v'Rava. Abaye of the opinion that Eidish Bal Miksasa lemafreya hu nifsal. Rava mikanu labo nifsal. Abaye is going to hold like Rav Yaisi. Tanakamba is going to hold like Rava. Says the Gemara Amri. 3 lines from the bottom though. If everyone agrees that Tach de Diber is within Diber, therefore what? Everyone would hold that when does it passel? It's going to passel limafreya. Elohacha, what's going on over here? Betoich k'dei diber k'diber dami kamifgi. That gufa is the machlokes. Do we indeed say that which someone says within the amount of time of a dibur is considered to all be one entity or not? Rabbanan savri dachdei dibur, love kedibur dami. Rav Yosi savar to turn over that in Gimel Mebeis holds Rav Yosi savar dachdei dibur is kedibur dami. So says the Gemara, there is not a fundamental machlekes going on over here whether we say dachdei dibur kedibur dami. Rather, the machlekes over here is. There's no machlekes whether we say does a dezaimim machabala miksasa bala kula. No, one more time. It's not a machlekes that we say dezaimim lemafreu nifsal or mikanu labo nifsal. Rather, it's a machlekes whether tell you the dibur it's kedibur dami or not. Asks the Gemara, really? Is this the machlekes? Is the machlekes toich the dibur kedibur dami? There have Yesis of the opinion that toich the dibur is indeed Kedibur dami. Asked the Gemara in the second line of Ayin Gimel Amid Beis. V'savar Rav Yosi Tachdei Dibur Kedibur dami. Really? V'atanan. But we learned in our Mishnah we've seen in the Darim. Harezu Temura Zayla Temura Shlamim. Harezu Temura Zayla. If someone says this should be an Ayla. No, it should be a Shlamim. What's halacha to an Ayla? Divrei Rabbi Meir. Clearly, Rameir holds you can't modify your words. Rav Yosi Omer says Rav Yosi, if that was your original kavana, hoyel since v'efsher like l'shnei shemos ke'achad. Therefore, devarim kayamim. I should say better. I sort of modified the case to make it make sense. The guy said. Harezu Tumura Asayla Tumura Shlamim. And we are now trying to figure out what did he mean. So the Tanikam or Amir says it's an Ayla. Says Rav Yosi, if your original Kavana was to do both, since it's impossible to say both at the same time, that's the reason why we're going to go Dvarim Kayamim and it's going to have the din of an Ayla. But of course, you're going to have to wait for it to get a mum. Sell it, etc. However, v'mamar tmuras ayla, and then v'nimlach, you changed your mind. V'amar tmuras shlamim, and then you indeed decide, no, I don't want it to be an ayla. I want it to be a shlamim. Harezu tmuras ayla. So what's the halacha? The halacha is that as the din of an ayla, meaning you cannot change your mind. Vavinaba, exactly as the Gemara says, and we wondered, Nimlach, if you changed your mind, Pshita, then it's Pashit that when he changed it to be a Shlamim is nothing. What would the Chiddush be? V'amar Rav Papa, 10 lines down in Gimel and Beis. First word on line is V'amar. Explains Rav Papa, Nimlach, B'toich Kedei Dibur. That's the Chiddush Kamrinan. And even though it's Toich Kedei Dibur, still it does not work. We said in the top line, Rav Yosi Toich Kedei Dibur should indeed work. Answers the Gemara, Amri, Trei Toich Kedei Dibur Have. There are 2 times within Toich Kedei Dibur. Chad Kedei Shelas Talmud L'Rav, V'chad Kedei Shelas Harav L'Talmud. 2 different time periods. Kilas, like the Rav Yosi Kedei Shelas Talmud L'Rav. Shalom Alecha Rebbe Umayri. The nafish, it takes longer. Which is what? Shalom Alecha Islay. So the shorter version of Teichle Dibur of just Shalom Alecha, that Rav Yossi does hold. But the longer version of the Talmud saying to the Rebbe, Shalom Alecha, Rebbe Yomairi, that extra moment, that is where Rav Yossi disagrees. Continues the Gemara, Amar Rava, smack in the middle of the Amid, Ayin Gimel and Beis, at the two dots, going back to the din of Zaymimim. Amar Rava, Edim Shahochashu, Ulabisayif, Hozmu. Says Rava, Edim refers Hochashu, they were contradicted, meaning there were other Edim that came in and testified not like they were saying. And then Hozmu, and then they were found to be not just wrong, that other Edim contradicted them, they weren't even there. Imanu Ayisim, they were elsewhere. What's the halacha? Neharagim, they get killed. Why? Da achasha tchilas hazama. Because achasha is the beginning of hazama, and therefore we put both eduas together, and therefore the person is going to be chayiv misa. Let's take a moment to look at a Rashi. Rashi says, Rashi is a little bit higher in the Amid. Rashi says, Shahochshu l'b'sayf hozmu ne'aragin. Kshenigmar adin al pm koidim shahochshu amra rava she'im lo nigmar adin adayin afilu hozmu mitzchila ein ne'aragin. She'neidim zayim ne'aragin. Not she'igmar adin, you have a complete din. V'achim we took up a sefer the Shemaita going to asu beitrei v'amri hachi paskenua ledina bumayu, and we paskin based on their din. So that's the din of Rava. Again, Hochshul of Seif Hozmu are going to be Neharagin. Why? Because Achasha is the beginning of the Hazama. The Gemara now elaborates. The beginning of Hazama just wasn't completed. So says Rava. My Rava, where do I get this din from? The Tanya, me'adine, me'idine, be'ish blaini. If a Eid says we give Eidus about a certain person, Shasima Sein Abda, he blinded his avid of Hibla Shina, he knocked at his tooth. Sharei Arav Omer Kain. Why did he do it? Because Sharei Arav Omer Kain. The master says he did the same, meaning he testifies also about the Eid, the Avid. V'nemsu Zaymimin, Mishalmin Demei Ayin Lavid. You have to make the Demei Ayin Lavid. Hechi Dami. Ilim Kidik like a Katachrinas, no other Eidos, Eidim. Mishalmin Demei Ayin Lavid. Basal Mavgil Chayris Dami. Because he goes to Chayris for this. You have to pay for the eye. You have to pay the value of the whole Avid. Why would the Rav be happy with this? So what exactly is going on in this case? There's no way that this brisa can be taken at face value. So rather, says the Gemara, this is what's going on. Elalav, the following. 10 lines to the bottom. The first word line is Kigain. The Bryce is referring to a case called the Asu Beitreva Amru Hipel Hashenai. Two Adim came in and said the master knocked out the tooth, or Sima Yasainai blinded his eye. Debayi Mesavim Le'arav Demei Einai. And based on that, what's the halacha? Is that the master has to pay the value of his eye and he has to set him free. Vasu Beitre Mitziyai. And then two middle Eidim come in, V'amru Einai. Then they said that what? Einai v'hader Shinai. He first blinded him, and then he knocked at his tooth, by the Meis of Lei. Ella Demei Sheinai, therefore he only has to pay for the value of the tooth and not the eye. Why? Because they're contradicting Kamai Limtziyai. Because now we have the first group and the second group clashing as to what exactly happened. V'hainu. And this is what the Brisa meant. Sharia Rav Omer Kain, that the master indeed said like these. Why? Because it's good for the master. That was the second set of Edim said. And then what happened? The middle set of Edim are found to be Edim Zayim by a third set of Edim. Then Mishalmin Demei Ayin Leved. That third cat, has to be the value of the eye to the Eved. Why? Because they were the ones that were, their Eidos would have made him lose that money. So based off of this, and on this we conclude, Rav approves, Shema Mina Tchilas Hazamahi, Hachasha Tchilas Hazamahi. Meaning, it has to be that it's considered part of the same process, because then we had a clash with Eidim A and Eidim B. If we say this clash and they go out the window, the fact that they're subsequently found to be Azama afterwards would be irrelevant, because the original Eidos just fell off. So rather, we have to say that the Hachasha, the contradicted, is beginning of the Hazama process, and therefore, for the subsequent Hazama, there will indeed be Tashlumim. That is Rava Zuraya, that Eidim Shochshul B'Sayv husband would indeed be Nargim. Why? We'll stop over here. We'll pick it up from Abaye, B'siyata Dishmaya.